More definitions for you. So these are valid forms of argument when you want to identify the type of argument without using a truth table. So what is modus ponens? Modus ponens, this would be a premise, and this would be a premise, and then this is your conclusion. So premise, if P then Q, premise, P, conclusion, therefore Q. You're moving forward through the argument, so that's called modus ponens. So the other one's called modus tollens. So this is the premise and this is the premise. If P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. You probably recognize this as contrapositive. And you know that's logically equivalent and that's valid. So modus tollens is working the argument, the conditional, through contrapositive. Okay, two errors. We've already went through these before, the converse and the inverse. So this would be a premise and this would be a premise. If P then Q, Q, therefore P. So that's the converse, switching the order. So that's converse error. Premise and premise. If P then Q, not P, therefore not Q. No, that's the inverse error. Okay, negation. So remember, when you're taking the negation of a true statement, you make it false. And if you take a negation of a false statement, you make it true. So here's a negation, negation, and negation, right? So this negation of a conditional is equivalent to P and not Q. And remember, these are the De Morgans, taking the negation of a P and Q and the negation of a P or Q. So make sure you have those correct. All right, so Venn diagrams can sometimes be used, and I'll just want you to draw circles to show whether it's valid or not. So here's an example. So here's a premise, and conclusion. So there's three things going on here. I have teachers, God, and people. So all teachers occasionally make mistakes. So there's the make mistakes bubble, and teachers are in it. Okay, then God never makes mistakes. So God is outside of the make mistake bubble, right? Therefore, no teacher is a God. Correct. There's no overlap. So it is valid. So again, you only will be instructed to do this on, say, one problem. Can't use it too often, but it can be a way to establish truth or not. All right, so let's work through the contradiction rule. So if we can show that a statement P is false, if we suppose that the statement P is false and that leads to a contradiction, then you can conclude that P is true. So you move through to find out if you can find a contradiction. So you can assume something is true and that leads to a contradiction, then you can find out that P is false. All right, so here we go. The knights and the knaves. So the knights on this island always tell the truth. The knaves always lie. Okay, so you come on this island and two natives come to speak to you. So A says B is a knight. Okay, B says A and I are opposite type. So what are A and B? Are they knights or knaves? So you just have to suppose one thing, right? So let's suppose A is a knight. So if A is a knight, he's telling the truth. So that must mean B is a knight. Okay, so if B is a knight, he's always telling the truth. And B is the knight says A and I are opposite type. Whoa, so that's false, right? Because we've got from what we're supposing, we've got them both the same type. So that must mean that B is a knave. He must be lying that they're not of opposite type. So B is a knave. So let's go back. Okay, if B is a knave and B says they're opposite type, he's lying. So that must mean they're the same type. So what does that mean about A? A is a knave as well. Okay, so I'm going to have you stop and read this because I'm not going to read it and think through with you. So pause here, read this. Okay, coming back. So from A and C, I can conclude that it's not in the kitchen. Okay, so then I'm going to use contrapositive. Oh, sorry, that's very messy. contrapositive on B. So contrapositive on B, since it's not in the kitchen, then it's not an elm. Then I'm going to use D, that I get either it's an elm or it's buried under the flagpole, so I can use the conclusion. The treasure is buried under the flagpole. So these are just kind of fun ways that we're going to use contradiction and using our arguments. We'll be learning how to prove things in future chapters. So this is just getting us our brains all greased up and ready to go.